She was the billionaire's daughter, born into wealth, raised in shadows, and blind since birth. But one late night, as the new maid folded linens in silence, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The girl wasn't completely blind at all. What no one dared to question was why the truth had been hidden all these years, and who stood to gain from her blindness. Would you want to uncover a secret like that, even if it destroyed the family you worked for? Before we jump in, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from? And what kind of story do you crave next? Drop your answer in the comments below. If stories like this grip your heart and refuse to let go, well, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I've got another powerful story coming your way tomorrow, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now let's get into today's story. The grand chandelier above the Westmore estate glittered like 1,000 tiny suns, yet for Isabella Westmore, it was nothing more than a shadow she would never see. She sat at the long dining table, her posture as straight as her etiquette tutors had drilled into her since childhood. Her fingertips brushed along the cool rim of her glass, the only way she could place it without fumbling. The clinking of cutlery, the faint scent of roasted duck, the murmur of her father's voice on the phone, these were her reality. Though she wore pearls around her neck and satin at her wrists, Isabella felt the same truth pressing down on her as it always had. Her life was a gilded cage. Her father's fortune kept her clothed, educated, and safe, but it also kept her isolated. He hired the finest tutors, the best caretakers, and the most discreet staff, all instructed to treat her condition as permanent, untouchable fact. Blind since birth, the world whispered. What use was it to dream of anything else? That night, she excused herself early from dinner, her cane tapping rhythmically against the marble as she left the hall. No one noticed. No one ever did. Behind the walls of gold and glass, her silence was the loudest part of her existence. On the other side of the estate's gates, a bus pulled into the dimly lit stop. Stepping down was Amara Johnson, clutching a second-hand bag with her uniform folded neatly inside. The night breeze carried the scent of saltwater from the bay, but Amara barely noticed. She had walked into new jobs before, but never one like this, serving in the household of one of the most powerful billionaires in the city. Her aunt had warned her, "They'll see the color of your skin before they see the work you do. Keep your head down." Amara had nodded, not because she agreed, but because she knew it was easier said than lived. She needed this job. After months of struggling, of helping her mother pay rent on their tiny apartment, the paycheck from Westmore Estate was salvation. When the gates opened, she stepped into a world that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Manicured lawns stretched endlessly, the windows of the mansion glowing warm against the dark sky. Yet inside, she quickly sensed the chill. The other maids, dressed sharply in black and white, glanced at her with thinly veiled skepticism. One whispered, not softly enough, "She won't last a week." Amara straightened her shoulders, offering a polite smile. "I'll last as long as I need to." Her voice trembled, but only slightly. Her first night was spent learning the rhythms of the household. Silver polished until her fingers ached, linens folded into perfect symmetry, trays balanced with care. The head housekeeper barked instructions like commands in a military camp. Amara absorbed everything quietly, her sharp eyes noticing what others overlooked, the smallest stains, the faintest chips, the subtle tension that lingered whenever the billionaire himself entered the room. It wasn't until nearly midnight that Amara was called to bring fresh sheets to the upper floor. She knocked softly, expecting silence, but a voice answered, "Come in." The room was large, lined with bookshelves and filled with a faint scent of lavender. Sitting by the window was Isabella, her pale dress falling around her like water. Her eyes, though clouded, seemed to search the space with practiced grace. "You're new," Isabella said, her tone polite but detached. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Amara." She kept her eyes down as she spread the sheets across the bed. There was a pause. Then Isabella asked, almost shyly, "Could you describe it to me?" Amara hesitated. "Describe what?" "The night. I can feel the air, but I don't know what it looks like." Amara turned to the window, the city lights flickering like fallen stars across the horizon. The sky's dark, but not empty. The moon's hanging low, like it's tired but still trying to shine. And the ocean, it's restless. Like it doesn't know whether to sleep or stay awake. A soft laugh escaped Isabella's lips, catching Amara off guard. No one's ever put it that way before. Something shifted in the room. For the first time since arriving, Amara didn't feel invisible. And for the first time in years, Isabella didn't feel entirely alone. Still, when Amara left the room that night, she couldn't shake the image of Isabella's eyes. They flickered, not blindly, not entirely. Just for a second, as Amara had described the moon, it was as if the young woman had turned her gaze toward the light, almost following it, almost seeing it. And in that moment, a question sparked in Amara's mind, one that would change both their lives forever. Amara couldn't sleep that night. The dormitory for the staff was plain and quiet, the hum of the ceiling fan the only sound as she stared at the ceiling. But her mind replayed the way Isabella's eyes had shifted, the way they seemed to follow the moonlight. She turned over, pressing her face into the thin pillow, but the question wouldn't let her go. Could it be possible that Isabella wasn't completely blind? Or had her imagination been playing tricks on her? The next morning, she watched Isabella from a distance as the young woman was led through the garden by her private aide. The aide spoke slowly, describing every step of the path, though Isabella barely nodded. Yet Amara noticed something strange. When the wind rustled the roses, Isabella tilted her head directly toward them, as though she knew exactly where the sound had come from. And when a squirrel darted across the path, Isabella's gaze flickered, quick, unthinking, toward its movement. Amara's breath caught. That wasn't blindness. At least, not the kind she'd always imagined. She wanted to say something, but how could she? She was the newest maid, still on probation, and already the others watched her with suspicion. Questioning the condition of the billionaire's daughter could mean losing her job, or worse. Still, the thought gnawed at her like an itch she couldn't scratch. That evening, she was asked to bring Isabella her tea before bed. Amara hesitated at the door before stepping inside. Isabella sat at the piano, her fingers brushing across the keys in a way that suggested memory more than sound. "You play beautifully," Amara said softly. Isabella smiled faintly. "I play what I remember. It's not the same as knowing." Amara placed the tray on the table and, almost without thinking, asked, "Can I ask you something? And you can tell me to leave if I'm out of line." Isabella turned her head toward her, curious. "Go on." "When I was describing the night yesterday, you looked at the window, as if you could see it." For a moment, silence filled the room. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed deafening. Isabella's hands froze above the keys. "No one's ever dared say that to me," she whispered. Amara's heart pounded. I just thought, maybe you're not completely blind." Isabella stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her usually calm voice carried an edge. "That's cruel. Don't mock me." "I'm not mocking you." Amara blurted out, stepping closer. "I swear I wouldn't. I noticed things. The way your eyes move. The way you follow sounds. Like you're aware of more than you let on." Isabella's lips parted as though she wanted to argue, but her breath faltered. For the first time, she didn't look like the untouchable heiress everyone treated her as. She looked like a girl caught between hope and fear. "I used to think that too," Isabella said finally, her voice breaking. "When I was little, I thought maybe I could see shadows. Maybe colors. But Father always told me not to imagine things that weren't real. He said it would only make life harder." Amara's chest tightened. The billionaire's words echoed like chains binding her. But what if it is real? Isabella shook her head, clutching the edge of the piano. If it was real, wouldn't the doctors have said so? Wouldn't Father have told me? Amara wanted to answer, but the weight of Isabella's trust, or lack of it, hung heavy. One wrong word and the fragile thread between them would snap. She swallowed, forcing herself to soften her tone. "Sometimes the people closest to us hide things. Maybe to protect us. Maybe to protect themselves. But don't you ever want to know the truth?" The question lingered in the air, raw and dangerous. Isabella's eyes filled with something unnameable, fear, longing, maybe both. She sank back into the chair, her hands trembling against her lap. "I do," she admitted, her voice no louder than a breath. "But if I find out, what if the truth hurts more than the blindness itself?" Amara's throat tightened. She had no answer, not yet. But in that moment, something passed between them. A spark, fragile but undeniable, that promised this was only the beginning. That night, Amara carried the empty teacup back downstairs, her mind reeling. She could feel the danger pressing in from all sides, the billionaire's pride, the staff's scrutiny, the unspoken rules of this household. But she also felt something else, a calling she couldn't ignore. Isabella deserved more than shadows and half-truths. And Amara, whether she was ready or not, had just stepped into a story much bigger than herself. And for the first time in years, Isabella went to bed with her heart racing, not from loneliness, but from the terrifying possibility that everything she believed about her world was a lie. But when morning came, she pushed the thought away. Lying in her bed, listening to the steady footsteps of the staff outside her door, Isabella told herself it was nothing more than imagination, a childish hope she should have buried long ago. She had learned how to silence the parts of her heart that wanted too much, wanting sight, wanting freedom, wanting love. Hope had only ever led to disappointment. At breakfast, she sat across from her father at the endless dining table. His phone buzzed, his voice clipped as he spoke of mergers and contracts. Isabella kept her face serene, her hands folded neatly, her silence perfect. But inside, the memory of Amara's words gnawed at her. What if you're not completely blind? She pressed her lips tighter, refusing to let the question rise. If her father noticed the tension in her shoulders, he didn't comment. He never did. Amara, meanwhile, found herself watching Isabella more closely than ever. Folding napkins in the corner of the dining room, she saw the way Isabella's gaze seemed to follow her father's movements, the way she instinctively flinched when he gestured too suddenly. These weren't the reactions of someone lost entirely in darkness. They were subtle, but real. And yet every time Amara opened her mouth, fear clamped it shut. What if she was wrong? What if speaking the truth got her dismissed, or worse, sent her family back into debt without her wages? That evening, Isabella asked Amara to read aloud from one of her books. Amara sat by the window, her voice carrying the words into the quiet room. But halfway through a sentence, she paused. Isabella's eyes had shifted again, this time toward the page itself. "Did you," Amara began, her voice careful. "Did you just look at the book?" Isabella froze. A flush rose to her cheeks, anger and shame mixing. "Stop," she snapped, harsher than she intended. Don't do this." Amara blinked, stung but firm. "I'm not trying to hurt you." "You are," Isabella shot back. Her hands trembled, though she tried to hide them in her lap. "Do you know what it's like to believe in something only to have it ripped away? To hope and then be told you were a fool for hoping? My father made sure I never lived with that kind of foolishness." "Or maybe," Amara said quietly, "he made sure you never lived with the truth." Silence hung heavy. Isabella turned her face away, her jaw tight, her body closing itself off. Amara's words had struck deep, but Isabella wasn't ready to let them in. She clung to her father's voice, his authority, the certainty he always carried. If he said she was blind, then she was blind. Anything else was dangerous. Anything else was rebellion. Later, as Amara left the room, she leaned against the hallway wall, her breath shaking. She had pushed too hard. She could see it in Isabella's face, fear disguised as anger, longing disguised as dismissal. Amara understood it, but it didn't make it easier. She whispered to herself, "She deserves to know. Even if she hates me for it." The next days passed with a strange tension. Isabella avoided conversations about sight, steering towards safe topics like music or books. Amara complied, but her eyes never stopped searching. One evening, she deliberately dropped a golden hairpin on the carpet. She watched as Isabella's head tilted slightly toward the faint glimmer of light it caught. Isabella's lips pressed together tightly when she realized she had betrayed herself, and she turned away without a word. Resistance built between them, not only in Isabella's denial but in Amara's growing restlessness. She was torn between self-preservation and the call of her conscience. The mansion had rules, spoken and unspoken. Do your work, keep your head down, never overstep. But Amara wasn't built to walk past injustice in silence. She had seen too much of it in the world outside those iron gates. She thought of her mother's tired eyes, her aunt's warning words, the way people with power always controlled the stories of those beneath them. And now, in the middle of all that wealth, she had found another kind of silence, forced on a girl who deserved more than anyone to live in truth. One late night, Amara lingered in Isabella's room as she tidied up. Isabella sat quietly, hands folded, but there was a storm behind her stillness. Amara hesitated, then asked, "Do you trust me?" The words cut through the silence like a blade. Isabella's throat tightened. Why would I? You've known me only days. Because sometimes, Amara said, voice steady but soft, a stranger sees what family refuses to. Isabella's breath caught. For a moment, the wall she had built around herself trembled. But then she shook her head, retreating. Enough. Please. I can't do this. Her plea wasn't sharp this time, it was fragile, broken. And that fragility hurt Amara more than any anger could. She gathered her things and left, her chest heavy, her eyes stinging. She knew she was losing ground, but she also knew the truth had already cracked open something inside Isabella. That night, as Isabella lay in bed, she pressed her palms over her eyes. She told herself it was better not to hope. Better to stay blind forever than to see the truth and learn it had all been a lie. Yet in the dark, Amara's question replayed in her mind like a whisper she couldn't silence. Don't you ever want to know the truth? And though Isabella tried to bury it, the answer her heart gave was yes. Always yes. Let me ask you this. If you were Isabella, would you cling to the comfort of what you've always been told, or risk everything to uncover the truth, even if it shattered the world around you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you'd face that choice. And deep in the mansion, as both women wrestled with fear and longing, fate prepared the very circumstances that would force them together in ways neither could escape. It happened during one of the autumn storms that swept across the coast without warning. The rain came in sheets, hammering against the tall windows, and the wind howled through the trees like a living thing. Inside the mansion, the lights flickered once, twice, then went out entirely, plunging the house into darkness. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of rain and the anxious shuffle of staff gathering candles. For most, the blackout was an inconvenience. For Isabella, it was a reminder of everything she had been told she lacked. She sat stiffly in her room, gripping the arms of her chair, her breathing uneven. The absence of artificial light made no difference to her vision, but it shook her nonetheless. The carefully ordered structure of her home, the glow of lamps, the steady hum of electricity, was gone. Without it, she felt the fragility of her world. Amara appeared in the doorway, a single candle casting her face in gold and shadow. "Miss Isabella," she asked gently, "are you all right?" Isabella's throat was tight. "It makes no difference to me whether the lights are on or not. I live in darkness anyway." Amara set the candle on the desk, her voice steady but warm. "Darkness isn't the same when it surrounds everyone. Tonight, you're not alone in it." Isabella swallowed hard, surprised at the comfort the words gave her. Yet the storm grew louder, the windows rattling as if they might shatter. Amara noticed Isabella's fingers trembling against the chair's arms. She hesitated only a moment before pulling another chair closer and sitting beside her. "Would you like me to stay until it passes?" For once, Isabella didn't refuse. She nodded silently, her lips pressing together, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Hours passed slowly. The storm showed no sign of easing, and the blackout stretched into the night. With the staff scattered across the mansion, checking on pipes and windows, Isabella and Amara were left in their own little island of candlelight. Forced proximity. Forced to share more than silence. To distract Isabella, Amara began to talk, not of the mansion, but of her life outside it. She spoke of her mother's tiny apartment, where the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors' laughter, and of the corner store where she worked part-time before landing this job. Isabella listened, caught by the rhythm of Amara's voice, her stories vivid with a texture of reality she had never known. "You've seen so much," Isabella murmured. "And me? I've lived in this house like a doll on a shelf." "You're not a doll," Amara said firmly. "You're a person who deserves to live, not just exist." The words struck Isabella like lightning. No one in her life had ever spoken to her that way. Everyone coddled her, handled her as if she were fragile porcelain. But Amara saw her differently, someone capable, someone who could want more. When the storm grew worse, Amara reached for Isabella's hand without thinking. At first, Isabella stiffened, unused to such boldness. But slowly, her fingers relaxed into Amara's, clinging as though that small connection tethered her to the world. The hours in darkness stripped away their usual roles. Isabella was no longer just the billionaire's daughter, and Amara was not just the maid. They were two women bound together by circumstance, sharing silence, fear, and the possibility of truth. At one point, the candle flickered low, shadows dancing across Isabella's face. Her eyes, usually clouded and unfocused, seemed to lock on Amara's features for a fleeting second. Amara's breath caught. It wasn't her imagination. Isabella was seeing something, maybe not clearly, maybe not fully, but something. She wanted to speak, to name it, but she remembered Isabella's resistance, her fear of hope. Instead, she simply squeezed her hand tighter, silently promising she wouldn't abandon her. By the time dawn broke and the storm eased, the mansion was still without power, but both women had changed. Isabella felt the warmth of Amara's hand linger in her own long after she let go, and Amara carried the certainty that the truth was closer than ever. As the staff bustled about, lighting lamps and complaining about ruined schedules, Isabella sat quietly, her heart unsettled. She couldn't deny the comfort she had found in Amara's presence. Nor could she deny the flicker she had seen, the faintest glimpse of her maid's face in the candlelight. Was it possible? Could it be real? And if it was, what did that mean about everything her father had told her? Think about this. If you were in Isabella's place, would you cling to the comfort of denial, or would you start chasing that fragile flicker of possibility, even if it risked unraveling the only life you'd ever known? Comment below. I'd love to hear where your heart leans. And so, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, Isabella and Amara found themselves drawn together not by choice, but by a force larger than both of them, the unrelenting pull of truth waiting to be uncovered. The following days passed with an unusual quiet. The estate returned to its glittering routines, chandeliers polished, silver shining, servants moving like shadows across marbled floors, but something between Isabella and Amara had shifted. The storm had left its mark not on the house, but on their hearts. Isabella found herself listening for Amara's footsteps in the hall, the soft rhythm of her presence that felt steadier than all the riches her father provided. Amara, meanwhile, carried the memory of Isabella's hand in hers, a fragile trust she was terrified of breaking. It was during one of those quiet mornings, when Isabella sat in the library tracing the spines of books she couldn't read, that Amara made a discovery. She had been assigned to dust the shelves, a task she did meticulously, her fingers lingering on old volumes. One book stuck out slightly further than the rest, a medical journal, its leather cracked with age. Out of curiosity, Amara pulled it free, wiping dust from its cover. As the pages fell open, her eyes caught on a familiar name, Isabella Westmore. Her breath stilled. The report inside was clinical, filled with charts and words she didn't fully understand. But one sentence burned into her mind: partial impairment of optic nerves. Prognosis: limited vision possible with corrective intervention. Partial impairment. Limited vision possible. Her hands trembled as she closed the book, sliding it back into place just as she heard footsteps behind her. Isabella's voice, soft but steady, drifted through the silence. "What are you reading?" Amara turned, her heart racing. Isabella stood at the doorway, her face calm, but her eyes, those clouded, questioning eyes, seemed to search her with uncanny precision. "Just dusting," Amara said quickly, but guilt laced her words. Isabella tilted her head, sensing more than she could see. "You sound unsettled." Amara hesitated, her fingers tightening around the feather duster. "Do you ever wonder if your father told you everything about your condition?" Isabella's breath caught. She stepped into the room, her hand grazing the edge of the doorframe. "Why do you ask that?" Amara swallowed hard. She wanted to speak the truth, but the weight of it felt dangerous. "Because I think there are things you haven't been told. Things hidden." Silence stretched, broken only by the faint rustle of pages in the draft. Isabella turned toward the shelves, her voice barely a whisper. "When I was little, I remember flashes. Shadows moving. Colors flickering. But every time I told Father, he'd frown and say I was imagining it. He told me hope would only hurt me. So I stopped speaking of it." The confession hung between them, heavy and raw. Amara's chest ached with anger she couldn't fully name. Why would a father silence his daughter's truth? What was he protecting, or hiding? Later that evening, Isabella sat by the piano, her fingers idle on the keys. Amara lingered nearby, torn between duty and the pull to comfort her. Finally, Isabella spoke. "Do you think he lied to me?" Amara met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "I think he feared the truth. Maybe because the truth meant you were stronger than he wanted you to be." Isabella's lips parted, trembling with a storm of emotions. She thought of her father's commanding presence, his sharp words, his insistence that she remain sheltered. Could it be that the man she depended on most had built her life on a false foundation? That night, she dreamed of fragments, flashes of light, a hand covering her eyes, voices whispering she was different. When she woke, her pillow was damp with tears she didn't remember shedding. Amara, too, wrestled with her conscience. The medical journal haunted her. She wanted to show Isabella, to place the truth in her hands, but fear held her back. What if it shattered Isabella completely? What if it put Amara in danger? The billionaire was a powerful man, and powerful men rarely forgave servants who trespassed into their secrets. And yet, every time Amara saw Isabella's tentative smile or heard the uncertainty in her voice, the choice became clearer. Silence was no longer an option. The breakthrough came one afternoon when Amara helped Isabella walk through the garden. Isabella paused by a cluster of roses, her fingers grazing the petals. "They're red, aren't they?" she asked suddenly. Amara froze. "What makes you say that?" "Because I feel it," Isabella whispered. "The warmth of the sun on them. The way everyone says they're the brightest." She turned her face toward Amara. "And because sometimes when I close my eyes, I think I can almost see them." Amara's throat tightened. She reached for Isabella's hand, her voice steady. "You're not imagining it. You've never been imagining it. You've been seeing pieces of the world all along." Tears welled in Isabella's eyes, not from certainty but from the weight of possibility. Her fingers clutched Amara's as though holding on to the only solid ground she had left. "Then why would he lie to me?" The question cut to the core, one neither of them could yet answer. But in that moment, Isabella's world cracked open. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe she might not be trapped in eternal darkness. And Amara, though terrified of what would come, vowed silently that she would help her find the rest of the truth, no matter what it cost. Pause here with me. If you uncovered evidence that your own family had hidden something this life-changing from you, would you confront them immediately, or would you hold back out of fear of what the truth might destroy? I'm curious. Share your thoughts in the comments. And as the rose petals trembled in the breeze, so too did the fragile line between lies and revelation, drawing Isabella and Amara closer to the breaking point where secrets could no longer stay buried. That night, Isabella asked Amara to stay longer than usual. The mansion was quiet, the hum of its grandeur softened by the lateness of the hour. Isabella sat cross-legged on her bed, no pearls at her throat, no satin gowns, just a simple white nightdress that made her look less like the daughter of a billionaire and more like the young woman she truly was. Amara sat across from her, folding laundry she had already finished hours ago, simply for the excuse to remain close. "Do you ever wish you'd been born into another life?" Isabella asked suddenly. Her voice was softer than the lamp's flicker. Amara glanced up, startled by the intimacy of the question. "Every day," she admitted. "I wish my mother didn't have to work herself sick. I wish people didn't look at me and decide who I was before I spoke. But then, maybe if I'd been born into another life, I wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't have met you." Isabella's lips curved into the faintest smile, fragile but real. "You always say things no one else would dare. Everyone else, they treat me like glass. You treat me like I'm alive." "Because you are," Amara said firmly. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "And you're more than what your father says you are. More than what this house has made you." The silence that followed was charged, filled with a tenderness neither dared name. Isabella's hand trembled slightly against the blanket, and without thinking, Amara reached across the space, covering it with her own. Isabella didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled instinctively, clutching Amara's like an anchor in an endless sea. In that moment, Isabella felt something she had long buried, the possibility of connection, of being seen not as broken, but as whole. Amara's touch wasn't pity. It was presence, steady and grounding. Over the next days, their bond deepened in subtle ways. Amara began describing colors to Isabella in new poetic forms, the warmth of yellow like sunlight on bare skin, the depth of blue like water holding secrets, the richness of green like hope rising after rain. Isabella listened hungrily, her imagination painting pictures she had once been forbidden to dream. And sometimes when she closed her eyes tightly, she swore she could catch glimmers of those colors, not in full, not certain, but enough to stir her heart. She never confessed it aloud, but Amara seemed to know. One afternoon, Amara took Isabella to the garden again. The sun was high, and the air smelled of jasmine and earth. Amara guided her to sit on the grass, breaking the rule that Isabella must always remain on benches or carefully paved paths. "Your father would be furious if he saw this," Isabella murmured, half nervous, half thrilled. "Then it's a good thing he's not here," Amara replied with a playful smile. They sat in the grass, Isabella's delicate fingers brushing blades she had never dared touch so freely. Amara plucked a daisy and placed it in Isabella's palm. "White petals, yellow center," she explained. "Simple, but perfect." Isabella lifted the flower close to her face. "For a second," she gasped, her eyes widening. "I think I see it," she whispered. "Not all of it, but something. Like a glow." Amara's chest tightened, tears threatening. "That's because you are seeing it," she said softly. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Isabella's voice shook. "Why does it scare me so much to believe you?" "Because believing means everything you've been told might be a lie," Amara answered. "And lies can feel safer than truths." The words sank deep. Isabella leaned closer, her forehead almost brushing Amara's shoulder. "Stay with me," she murmured, vulnerable in a way she had never allowed herself before. "I'm not going anywhere," Amara promised. For the first time in her life, Isabella felt what freedom might taste like, not found in wealth or status, but in the bond forming between her and Amara. It wasn't the bond of servant and mistress, or of charity and need. It was something equal, something alive, something dangerous and beautiful. Later that evening, as they lingered in the library, Isabella asked Amara to play a game with her. "Tell me what I look like," she said, surprising even herself with the request. Amara froze, her cheeks warming. "What do you mean?" "Describe me. Everyone else avoids it, as though talking about my face might remind me of what I can't see. But I want to know." Amara took a breath, her voice careful but tender. You have hair the color of gold spun in sunlight. Skin soft, like porcelain warmed by life. And your eyes," she stopped, suddenly self-conscious. "My eyes," Isabella urged, her breath catching. "They're pale, like clouds before the rain. But when you laugh, it's like light breaks through them. Like they remember what it's like to shine." Silence pressed close, their hearts thundering in the space between words. Isabella reached out, her hand brushing Amara's cheek. "No one has ever said that to me before." Amara leaned into the touch, just slightly, her voice a whisper. "No one's ever seen you the way I do." The tension was undeniable, fragile and yet electric. And though neither of them spoke of it, both knew their bond had grown into something that could no longer be hidden. Viewers, think about this. When someone finally sees you, not for your flaws, not for what the world has labeled you, but for who you truly are, would you let yourself lean into that love, even if it terrified you? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to know how you'd face that choice. And as Isabella's hand lingered against Amara's cheek, the bond between them deepened into something neither could deny, a bond strong enough to heal, yet fragile enough to shatter with a single truth. The shattering came sooner than either of them imagined. It was late evening, the kind of silence that felt heavy in the mansion's marble halls, when Isabella's father returned from an unexpected trip. His footsteps echoed like thunder before his voice cut through the stillness. "Isabella, why are you out of your room at this hour?" His tone was sharp, colder than usual, laced with suspicion. Isabella flinched, pulling her hand away from Amara as though burned. The warmth between them vanished, replaced by dread. Amara rose quickly, bowing her head, but not before Isabella's father's gaze caught the closeness they had shared. "What is this?" he demanded, eyes narrowing. "The maid keeping you company like some companion? Is this what I pay her for?" Amara opened her mouth to speak, to explain, but Isabella's father silenced her with a glare so venomous it nearly knocked the breath out of her. Isabella tried to stand firm, her chin lifting slightly. "Father, it's not what you think." Amara was. "Enough," he snapped, cutting her off. His hand slammed against the doorframe, making Isabella flinch again. "You don't know what's best for you, Isabella. That's why I make the decisions. And I will not have you filling your head with nonsense, especially from someone who doesn't belong in this house." The words were sharp knives, not only for Amara but for Isabella too. The unspoken truth behind them, that Amara was lesser, disposable, unworthy, hung heavy in the air. Amara's chest tightened with anger, but she bit it back, her jaw clenching. For the first time, Isabella didn't stay silent. Her voice trembled, but it carried. She belongs here more than anyone, father. She treats me like I matter. When was the last time you did? The silence that followed was a chasm, deep and dangerous. Her father's face hardened, his pride wounded. You're blind, Isabella. You can't see the world as it is. You live in fantasies, and I won't let you destroy yourself by trusting someone who only wants what she can't have. Amara's heart lurched. Was he talking about money? Power? Or something else? Something closer to the truth neither she nor Isabella had dared name? The next days were filled with tension thick enough to choke on. Amara was restricted, her duties reassigned so she had less time near Isabella. And Isabella, though she fought, found herself locked in her father's careful watch. The mansion became a cage, every hallway a reminder of what had been ripped away. The bond they had nurtured now sat like glass shards under their skin, too sharp to touch, too painful to ignore. Isabella longed to feel Amara's steadying hand again, to hear her voice that made the world less suffocating. Amara, meanwhile, burned with the need to protect her, to reveal the truth about her blindness fully and irreversibly, even if it meant losing everything. One stormy night, unable to bear the silence, Isabella slipped into the hall, following faint echoes until she found Amara cleaning in the dimly lit study. The reunion was raw, their emotions spilling too quickly. I can't do this, Isabella whispered, her voice breaking. He's watching me like I'm a prisoner. And she hesitated, trembling. I don't know how to fight him without you. Amara stepped forward, her hands almost reaching before stopping herself. Her voice shook with suppressed emotion. You don't have to fight him alone. But Isabella, there's something I have to tell you. Something about your blindness. It's not what you think. Isabella froze, her breath shallow. What do you mean? Before Amara could continue, the door creaked open. Isabella's father stood there, shadows cutting his face into something monstrous. He had heard. So it's true, he growled. You've been filling her head with lies. No, Amara said quickly, stepping in front of Isabella. It's not lies. It's the truth she deserves. Enough. His voice boomed, final and terrifying. You're finished here. Pack your things tonight. The blow landed harder than any physical strike could. Isabella gasped, her hand reaching blindly for Amara, but the distance between them had already widened. Amara's chest ached with helpless rage, knowing that one step toward Isabella could cost them both everything. Isabella's sob was soft but searing. Father, please, don't do this. I need her. Her father's reply was cold steel. What you need, Isabella, is control. And I will never let some outsider poison my daughter's life. Amara lowered her gaze, swallowing the scream clawing at her throat. She wanted to fight, to expose the truth about Isabella's condition, but the fear of making things worse tethered her. For the first time, she wondered if her courage would destroy the very person she was trying to protect. That night, as thunder rattled the mansion, Amara sat on the edge of her narrow bed, trembling. She had never felt more powerless, yet never more certain of her purpose. She knew too much to walk away. And she cared too deeply to let Isabella remain shackled to lies. But at the same time, Isabella lay awake in her room, fists clenching sheets damp with tears, haunted by one terrifying thought. What if her father was right? What if trusting Amara meant losing everything she had left? If you were in Isabella's place, caught between loyalty to family and trust in someone who gave you freedom, whose voice would you believe? Drop your answer in the comments, because that choice could change everything. And as lightning split the night sky, two hearts beat in separate rooms, knowing their bond was on the verge of breaking, whether by force, fear, or the truths that demanded to be spoken. The storm lingered into dawn, heavy clouds pressing against the windows of the estate as if nature itself mirrored the tension inside. Amara sat at the edge of her packed suitcase, her hands still trembling. She had obeyed the order to prepare to leave, but her heart refused to accept it. Each time she thought of Isabella's face, pale and desperate, her resolve hardened. Walking away would mean abandoning the one person who had trusted her when the rest of the world hadn't. But staying meant risking everything, her safety, her future, maybe even Isabella's peace. In the silence of her room, she whispered to herself, "What good is survival if it costs me her freedom?" The words hung there, as though daring her to choose courage over fear. Meanwhile, Isabella sat hunched by her window, her hands fisted in her lap. She hadn't slept. The house felt suffocating, every tick of the clock echoing her father's final words. But louder still was the memory of Amara's voice, steady, unwavering, promising her a truth she'd never been given. And for the first time, Isabella questioned whether her loyalty to her father had been nothing more than submission to chains disguised as love. By morning, Isabella made her decision. She slipped quietly from her room, ignoring the threat of discovery, and found Amara sitting by the suitcase. The sight nearly broke her. The maid who had become her closest friend, her anchor, her heart's quiet companion, reduced to the humiliation of being cast out. "You can't leave," Isabella whispered, her voice urgent. "Not like this." Amara stood, meeting her gaze with eyes that brimmed with determination and sorrow. "If I stay, he'll destroy us both." "Then let him try," Isabella shot back, surprising herself with a steel in her voice. "I've been living blind in more ways than one, Amara. But I see now. And I won't let him take away the only person who's ever seen me as more than broken." The silence that followed was electric, filled with unshed tears and words too dangerous to say aloud. Amara reached for Isabella's hands, clasping them tightly. "If we do this, if we fight him, we have to be ready for everything that comes. He'll use his power, his wealth, everything he has to silence us." "I don't care," Isabella whispered. "What good is all this wealth if it costs me the truth?" Her words were a blade cutting through years of fear. Amara pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her as though anchoring them both against the storm. It was then Isabella spoke the words she hadn't even admitted to herself until now. "I need you, Amara. Not just as my friend. Not just as my protector. I need you." Amara froze, her chest tightening, her heart racing. For so long, she had buried her feelings beneath duty, afraid to tarnish what they had with desires too bold for their world. But hearing Isabella's confession broke every barrier she had built. Slowly trembling, she whispered back, "And I need you too." The choice was made, silently sealed between them. They would not let fear or power tear them apart. Together, they would face the truth, no matter how dangerous it proved. Later that day, Isabella confronted her father in the great hall. The grandeur of the room made her small frame look even smaller, but her voice did not falter. "Father, I won't let you send Amara away. You've hidden things from me, things about my sight, about my life. And I deserve to know." Her father's face twisted, torn between fury and fear. "You don't understand, Isabella. The truth will destroy you." "No," Isabella said firmly. "The lies are what will destroy me. I see more with Amara by my side than I ever have in this house built on secrets." Amara stood behind her, silent but unflinching, her presence a shield. The billionaire's jaw tightened as his empire of control crumbled in front of him. For the first time, he realized his daughter was no longer a child he could bend. She had chosen, and she had chosen against him. He turned away, his silence both an admission and a threat. Isabella's hand sought Amara's, squeezing tightly. Their bond was no longer a fragile secret. It was a choice, a declaration, a rebellion against the shadows that had caged them both. Think about this. When the truth threatens to upend your world, would you still choose it over the comfort of lies? Would you risk love, freedom, and everything you know for a chance at something real? Comment your answer. I want to hear how you'd face that kind of choice. And as Isabella stood with Amara's hand in hers, her voice echoing with defiance in the vast hall, she knew she had finally chosen, for truth, for love, for herself. Whatever storm came next, they would face it together. The storm did come, but not in the way either of them expected. That night, Isabella's father summoned the family doctor, the very same man who had overseen Isabella's condition since she was a child. His presence in the mansion was like a shadow resurfacing, familiar yet suffocating. Isabella sat rigidly in the drawing room, Amara's hand steady on her shoulder, as the doctor arrived with his leather bag and carefully avoided her eyes. Her father's voice was sharp, almost desperate. "Tell her, doctor. Tell her what I've spent years protecting her from. Show her that I was right." But the doctor hesitated, his gaze flicking toward Amara and then back to Isabella. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders sagging with the weight of years of silence. "Isabella, your condition is not what you've been told. You were not born fully blind. Your sight was limited, yes, but there were treatments. There were possibilities." His words faltered as guilt bled through. "But they were denied. Your father believed it was safer to keep you dependent. He feared hope would hurt you more than blindness itself. Isabella's breath hitched. Her chest felt like it was splitting open. She turned to her father, her voice shaking with betrayal. You chose for me? You decided I should live in darkness, when I could have had a chance. Her father's face twisted, his pride collapsing into something raw. I did it to protect you. The world is cruel, Isabella. I couldn't risk you being hurt, disappointed, broken. No, Isabella said firmly, tears spilling freely now. You did it to protect yourself. To keep me under your control. To keep me blind to everything, including the truth of who I could be. Amara knelt before Isabella, her voice steady but tender. You still have that chance, Isabella. It's not too late. The truth is painful, yes, but it's also freedom. And I'll be by your side no matter what it takes. Something shifted then. The weight of years lifted, replaced by a fragile, trembling hope. Isabella squeezed Amara's hands, her tears falling onto them. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid of the unknown. She felt ready. In the days that followed, consultations with specialists confirmed what Amara had suspected. Isabella's sight could improve. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but with therapy and surgery, she might see more than glimmers. The revelation was both terrifying and exhilarating. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight painted the garden gold, Isabella sat outside with Amara. She held a daisy in her palm again, just like before. Only this time, when she lifted it close, she gasped, not because she imagined a glow, but because she saw it. The faint outline of petals, blurred yet unmistakable. Her fingers trembled as she whispered, I see it. Amara, I see it. Amara's tears spilled freely, her laughter breaking through sobs. She hugged Isabella fiercely, whispering, I knew it. I knew you could. Behind them, her father stood at a distance, shoulders heavy with regret. He had lost the battle for control, but in the quiet of that moment, he realized he had also lost something greater, the chance to be the one his daughter trusted. And yet, watching her laugh with Amara, he also saw something undeniable. His daughter was alive in a way she had never been before. Perhaps that was redemption enough, even if it didn't come through him. Weeks later, Isabella and Amara walked hand in hand through the mansion's corridors, their bond no longer hidden in whispers and shadows. The staff looked on with quiet awe, sensing that something extraordinary had grown between the daughter of the house and the maid who had dared to speak truth. And in Isabella's eyes, those pale eyes that now caught flecks of light, there was no shame. Only love, resilience, and freedom. One evening, Isabella turned to Amara in the library, where their journey had begun. Do you realize, she said softly, that you were the first person who ever really saw me? And now, because of you, I finally see myself. Amara smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from Isabella's face. And I'll keep reminding you of who you are, every single day. Their kiss was soft, trembling with the weight of everything they had endured, but steady with the promise of what lay ahead. It wasn't just love. It was a declaration, a vow carved from truth and defiance. The mansion that once felt like a cage was no longer a prison. It was simply a place, a backdrop to the life they were building together, one rooted not in lies or control, but in courage, freedom, and unexpected love. Here's the final question I'll leave you with. Do you believe love has the power to restore sight, not just to eyes, but to hearts blinded by lies and fear? Let me know in the comments, because this story has shown us that sometimes, the greatest vision comes from love itself. And as the sun dipped behind the garden, painting the world in gold and shadow, Isabella and Amara stood together, no longer blind, no longer bound, but finally, beautifully free.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this story moved you, the next one will hit even deeper. It's more gripping, more unexpected, and waiting for you right now. Don't hesitate. Click the video on your screen, and I'll see you in the next story.